What up guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're in London, we're going to shoot some film and we're going to try and bring our photos to life with a little bit of movement. Now, this isn't going to be easy because we're not going to be using a tripod, everything's going to be handheld. We're going to embrace the blur and the imperfections of film photography and out of focus photography. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to help tell our story a little bit more uniquely. And that's especially poignant in a place like London, because London has been filmed, or shot, sorry, so many bloody times that, you know, we've all seen it before. So we're going to try and tell our story a little bit more uniquely, and hopefully we'll all learn something along the way, how to control our camera with a bit more, you know, finesse, so we can nail these sorts of exposures, which aren't easy. I've had a bit of a mixed bag weather-wise so far. It's currently, I'm not sure if it's raining or sun, or possibly a bit of both. But either way, we'll embrace it, we'll make it work. But before we go any further, B-roll with a bit of a difference. We need to make sure that we're set up correctly. So first of all, you need a manual camera. That can be an SLR, a rangefinder, or even a DSLR if you're using digital. However, it cannot be a point and shoot because we just don't have the control over the settings. If you are using film, we need a 1 to 200 speed film if it's sunny, and a 4 to 800 speed film if it's slightly darker, because you do need that flexibility to get the settings right. Talking of settings, we need probably 125th down to a 60th or 30th of a second for any panning shots. If you're getting people moving through the frame, again, if it's a very fast subject, something like a 125th or a 60th frame of 60th of a second will work quite well, but it could be if you've got a person moving through the frame, you might need to go from a 30th to a 15th of a second. And if you want to create more abstract, ghostly images, you can play around from anywhere between a 30th and probably 1/8 of a second. Any lower than that, you're kind of getting into territory of complete blur. And when you're taking these photos, it's very important that we are stable. So we don't want to be moving around because it's going to create unnecessary shake that we don't want. So elbows tucked in, nice big deep breath. Use the strap around your neck to create an extra bit of security, and then you should be secure and getting giving yourself then the best opportunity to get the great results, hopefully. So I've stopped off at this Dyke crossing here, and I'm hoping to get some panning shots as the cars are coming down the road. It's very difficult at the moment because I'm using a 500 ISO film and it's obviously very sunny. So this is kind of like a little bit darker, so I can kind of use a 30th or a 60th of a second and still have the aperture range. So yeah, let's see what I can get. So I'm not gonna lie to you, it doesn't get much better than this. The first few are probably some of the best I shot. Well, you could be the judge of that, but yeah, the first ones are quite good. I was quite happy. The first one especially, I really liked. I just wish the kid was looking forward on his bike. That would have been slightly better. The second one is okay. I could maybe have done with a wider lens, but I only got a 50 for the X-700 and that's absolutely fine. So we work with what we've got. And the third one, I like the Dutch angle. I actually like this image quite a lot. I like the fact that he's half cut off. It's quite cool. It's kind of intentional. And yeah, on to the next one. So this is a really quite good crossroad section to get a panning shot. I'm gonna see if I can get maybe a couple of bikes because I'm on a 50mm lens. I need something that's a little bit sort of smaller, whereas if I go for like a taxi, it's gonna be quite difficult to get. But so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and get a couple of bikes, and I'm gonna see if I can get a taxi for a classic London cab, but maybe shoot it portrait instead of landscape. Let's see. As I alluded to there, again, I could have done with a wider lens. I think with a panning shot, a 35 is probably better standing at the side of the road. But as it turns out, I quite like how this first one came out. Yeah, again, a bit of a Dutch angle. I mean, the subject could have been sharper, but overall, I'm pretty happy with it. This second one is probably the cleanest one in terms of how in focus the subject is. Probably could have used a slightly faster shutter speed, but overall I'm pretty happy with this. And the fact that he's looking dead at me as well is quite cool. And again, a bit of a Dutch angle for this the cab. This is probably a better one than the first one with the cab. But again, you get the idea. You're panning through, the background's blurred, and the subject should be sharp, or in this case, sharpish. Trying to do this over one day with 2 rolls of film is pretty tricky. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flash up some more recent examples that I've taken, starting with this one here. This was taken in Brighton, and I like this one. The subject's pretty sharp, but the background's nice and blurry. The colors are cool. I like the composition. Again, I like the Dutch angle. This was one of my more favorite panning shots that I've taken recently. Again, this one, you got a bit of a Dutch angle, and the subject's nice and sharp. And I like the graffiti on the bike. The stock is XX, which is by Kodak, and it's absolutely stunning. So if you can shoot it, it's without the rimjet layer. I'm gonna make a video on this, so make sure you're subscribed because that is coming soon. And another one here on XX is absolutely spot on. I would have definitely used a faster shutter with this because the subject is much sharper and the background isn't quite as blurry, but you still get that effect. So overall, I'm pretty happy. And if you punch right in, you can see how sharp this one actually is. You've got all this rubbish, which is obviously horrible in the graffiti. But if you could get like a little bit of movement, say here, on a portrait shot, it might look quite nice. Let's see what we can get. I like this Victoria's Secret sort of poster, a bit of texture. See if we can get subjects coming like across like that. Maybe a bit of motion blur to add a bit of mystery against the Victoria's Secret. And I also like this texture here, and maybe a subject walking across. Might be quite cool. Okay, so none of these photos are worth writing home about. In fact, they're all pretty crap. So let's move on to some good ones. Starting with this one. I like this one much more. I love the textures. I love the graffiti sort of background. It's really cool. I love the fact that it's kind of monotoned colors with a little bit of blue, but then you've got this really cool red subject walking through. She's very ghostly. Could maybe have used a slightly faster shutter speed with this one. Might have made it even better. Now this photo is cool, I really like it. You've got the 2 subjects, which I think are like almost perfectly blurred, where you can't quite see their facial features, but it's not as blurred as the first example. And I featured this photo in a video previously, which I'll link in the top left-hand corner if you want to check that out. This tunnel here is quite interesting, and I like this. You see this reflection here, you see with people walking through. I don't know whether maybe you can get people coming through in this. I don't know, we'll have a play around, see what we can get. I don't hate these photos, I don't love these photos, they're nothing special, but it does give you sort of the idea of how it works. Find the reflection where you get a bit of distortion anyway, so it creates a little bit more of an abstract image anyway. Plus then if you can get a little bit of movement, it's a nice combination to have the 2. But yeah, like I said, not the world's greatest images there. With the lights here and the reflection, I'm gonna see how I can get like maybe a slightly Dutch angle. The subject's walking through. You can see my hand is in the reflection. So yeah, let's see what I can get there. But could be interesting, could be a bit boring, but reflections always give you like a little bit extra. So you have the distortion on top of the distortion, if that makes sense. This one's a bit stronger image. I like the Dutch angle, I like the composition. I don't like the subject. I could have done with a better subject coming through. So that's something that could have improved the image. And in fact, I actually looked through my sort of archives of film photos and I couldn't really find any sort of abstract movement photos using reflections. So that's something that I am going to work on. But yeah, on to the next one now. So I've got these 2 balloons here. I haven't quite worked out what I'm going to do with them yet, but we'll see what we can get. Maybe a bit of movement on the balloon so you kind of get that blurred love heart sort of in there. I don't know, we'll see. So neither of these photos landed particularly how I wanted them to. I was hoping for a little bit more balloon movement with the subject going through. It is a very tricky shot. I'm sure you guys can see what I was trying. I didn't quite execute it how I wanted to, but I wasn't a million miles away. So this one here, we've got this dude here smoking. I'm gonna try and get someone coming through the frame at the same time. Obviously, I'm trying to get him static and the subject in motion. So let's see how that goes. With these images, I don't hate them. In fact, I nailed the people moving through the frame, but the background's a little bit soft for my liking. I think perhaps I could have compromised a little bit of the blurry movement of the subject moving through the frame to get the background a bit sharper. So not bad, but not great. You see this window here, kind of opaque with these sort of textures in there. I like that. Plus I've got this light here, which with CineStill could look quite cool. So I'm going to see if I can get a subject walking across and see how that comes out. I like this one a lot more. I love the subject walking through. The split legs is good. The clothes she's wearing are also good. And the blur that she is kind of perfect. I actually wish I'd taken this landscape so you could have seen more of the window, which I think was quite a highlight, and I haven't actually got that in. So that was a bit of a faux pas on my part, I suppose. I'm on a 50mm lens, so I'm going to see whether I can fit it in, but you've got the reflection of Dean Street there, you've got this cool light here. It's just started raining, so it'd be interesting to see if we can get a photo with some of these elements in to tell a bit of a different story, you know, of a famous place in London. Dean Street is a very famous road in Soho, one which you've probably seen photographed a load of times, especially this specific building. And by creating a little bit of a different photograph by having some movement in there, although none of these photos are particularly good, none of them are bad. I especially like the last photo here, but I don't like the fact that the reflection is kind of cutting off the Dean Street, but I like the movement of the subject and the fact that they've kind of got their hands over their head. I think that's really cool. So I'm quite happy with that last one. On the tube here, so we're going to see if we can get some movement where perhaps a character or a subject is standing still and the train moves, but we'll have a little play. So on the tube is a great place to get a subject still and a moving background, because obviously you've got the tubes which move pretty fast, so you can use quite a fast shutter if you've got the right ISO set, so that's either with a film or with a digital camera. I like both of these images actually. I really like them actually. And I took this photo also while I was down there, which I also really like. It's quite cool. Now I use this technique quite a lot where I've got the static subject and the moving background. So instead of going through some of my favorite photos, I'm just going to show you them because you don't need me to dissect them. I love this stairwell here. This is really cool. I'm going to get a little photo where I flick the lights so you get a little bit of an abstract. It's not going to be the world's greatest photo. We'll give it a go, and then I'm going to see if I can get someone coming up the stairs. Because I'm on CineStill, this will look quite cool. CineStill is just perfect for this, and the colours are great, and I love the photos, but they're nothing really special, but probably the first one of the two is my favourite of these. A good one for abstract here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to frame it quite tight. I have to really because I've got 50mm lens. Famous place in London, by the way, and I'm going to sort of twist the camera like that. Let's see what I can get. Both of these are really cool. CineStill just absolutely nails the colours on this one. I think, again, the first one is my favourite for this one, but again, let me know which is your favourite of the two. Same with this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use these Central Cafe words from this angle, and I'm going to pull out as I take the photo, see if I can get a drag effect. Wish me luck. Now I like this photo. It didn't quite come out how I wanted because I wanted a bit of a drag to it, but I still like the photo. It looks quite cool. And again, part of a carousel, it's quite fun. With these, I have been doing this quite a lot more recently to try and create a bit more mystery behind my photos. So intentional blur. So again, I'm not going to dissect all of these photos that I've taken more recently, but I will show you them now. Right, so next up, we're talking about how to execute these photos properly. Now, I have gone through a bit of detail as we've been going, and I mentioned this when I was talking about what sort of kit we need, camera and film. However, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, and I'm going to split this section up into 5 mini sections. So with all these types of shots, as we've mentioned, you have to be quite intentional. So make sure your camera is set up. You should have the shutter speed right, or as close to right as physically possible, the aperture set so your exposure is correct, and you want to find a nice spot. That is how we're going to get the best results consistently when we are trying such difficult shots. Something we talked about before is having steady hands or a good foundation. So like I said, elbows in, make sure you breathe out and hold, and then get your shot. These are really tricky shots to keep very sharp, especially when film is hard to keep sharp anyway. So that is one way we can do it. As we mentioned before, use objects to lean up against and create almost like a tripod. You can also use a strap like this, wrap it around your neck and then lock it in. So then you've got your elbows locked in and you've got the strap around your neck to give you a little bit more stabilization, because as we said before, no stabilization in camera. This is a pan specific one. This is following through. So when we're doing our panning shots, make sure that you keep the movement all the way through. Even if my shutter is going to be released in the middle of the shot, you start the movement, follow, shut, make sure you release the shutter, and then you're still panning. So it's going to be like this as opposed to that. That's going to help keep that motion nice and smooth, and you're going to get a much better result at the end. Next up is contrast, and that isn't just light versus shadow, which obviously is one of the things we're looking to create here. Make sure that if we're using a panning shot, is the background nice and bright? Can we pick out a darker subject in front, or vice versa? But this is also sharpness versus blur. So for example, if we're using a nice bit of graffiti on the background and then we're using a subject to come across to grab that movement, can we make sure that that background is nice and sharp against the contrast of the movement, which is going to be blurry? And the last point here is experiment. We've talked about it on this channel loads of time, how film isn't meant to be perfect. That's the beauty of shooting film, the imperfections, the grain, the out of focus elements. Now, what we're gonna get here is some interesting results, different results, and you will have seen that throughout this video. Imperfection, you've got to embrace it, otherwise you're just gonna throw every single photo you have away by 1 or 2, which is a very expensive way to get film photos. So my advice is always embrace the imperfections. You're not gonna nail every single shot, and if you don't nail them, it doesn't matter. You can still create beautiful art without perfection. And that's another video done and dusted. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe because there's plenty more to come. And just remember, when you're taking photos, especially in iconic places like London, think outside the box, a bit of movement, a bit more abstract, different angles, anything to just create something slightly more interesting, slightly different. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that one, guys. See you in the next one. Peace.
Hey.